She didn't reject Gendry because she didn't love him. She rejected him because she already knew what was coming, knew who was dangerous, and knew that love would make her blind to all of it. Most fans walked away from that scene thinking the same thing. Arya Stark, the girl who survived the streets of Bravos, who trained under the Faceless Men, who looked death in the eye and said, "Not today," simply wasn't ready for love. That she was too wild, too broken, too much of a warrior to be someone's lady. Some fans even called it character assassination. She was just running away from her feelings, they said. And honestly, that's what the show wanted you to think. Because if you were looking at Arya's emotions, you completely missed what Arya was actually doing. She wasn't running from love. She was protecting it. And there is a difference. A massive, devastating difference that changes everything about how you read the final season. Stay with me, because this goes deeper than you think. Let's go back, not to season 8. Further, go back to the moment Arya Stark stopped being Arya Stark. Bravos, the House of Black and White. A girl is no one. That's not just a line. That's a methodology. The Faceless Men didn't just teach Arya how to kill. They rewired how she processes people, how she reads them. She learned to watch, to observe every micro-expression, every gesture, every contradiction between what a person says and what their body does. She learned that the most dangerous people in the world are not the ones who look like monsters. They are the ones who look like saviors. And this is the key that unlocks everything. Because when Gendry proposed, when he got down on one knee, breathless, raw, his heart completely exposed, what did Arya do? She didn't cry. She didn't hesitate in the way someone hesitates when they're confused. She hesitated the way someone hesitates when they already know the answer, but wish they didn't. "You'll be Lord of Storm's End," she said. "I'm not a lady." And fans took that at face value. A girl who never fit the mold, rejecting a life she wasn't built for. But watch her eyes in that scene. Watch the way she looks at him, not with uncertainty, but with something that looks almost like grief. Like someone saying goodbye to a version of themselves they never got to become. Because Arya wasn't just saying no to Gendry. She was saying no to safety. Because she knew that what was coming was going to require her to be free. Unattached. Unpredictable. She was going to have to do something no Lady of Storm's End could ever do. Here's something the show never explains outright. But it's there. In every scene, if you know how to look. The Faceless Men operate on one core principle. Attachment is a weakness that will get you killed. Not because love is wrong, but because love makes you predictable. And a predictable assassin is a dead assassin. When you love someone, your enemies know exactly how to control you, exactly where to point the knife. They don't need to threaten you. They threaten them. Arya watched this destroy her family for 8 years. Ned Stark loved his honor more than he loved strategy, and lost his head. Robb Stark loved Talisa more than he loved his alliance, and lost everything at the Red Wedding. Catelyn Stark loved her children so ferociously that she couldn't see the manipulation happening right in front of her. Love, loyalty, attachment. Every Stark died, or nearly died, because someone used what they loved against them. Arya learned that lesson in the most brutal school in the known world. And so when Gendry knelt before her, this boy she'd grown up beside, this boy who looked at her like she was the only real thing in a world of shadows, she made a choice. Not a selfish choice, a strategic one. She chose to stay dangerous, because she could already feel it. That pull, the way her guard softened when she was around him, the way she laughed differently, the way her eyes tracked him across rooms without meaning to. She felt herself becoming vulnerable. And vulnerable, in the world Arya Stark lived in, meant dead. Or worse, it meant the people around you ended up dead. So she said no, and she walked away, and she put the armor back on. But here's the part that makes your chest ache when you realize it. She didn't stop loving him. She just chose the mission over the feeling. And the mission wasn't over yet. Now we get to the part that nobody talks about. Daenerys Targaryen arrived in Winterfell like a vision. Silver hair, 2 living dragons, an army at her back, and the man Arya Stark loved more than almost anyone else in the world riding beside her. Jon Snow, her brother in every way that mattered. and everyone was dazzled. The Northerners were terrified. Sansa was suspicious. Bran was Bran. But Arya? Arya watched. Think about what Arya Stark sees when she looks at a person. She doesn't see their title. She doesn't see their army or their dragons or their speeches about breaking the wheel. She sees behavior. And the behavior she saw from Daenerys in those early Winterfell scenes was precise, calculated, controlled in a way that felt less like wisdom and more like performance. Watch how Daenerys interacts with people she can't immediately use. Watch how her warmth evaporates the moment she's not being observed by someone whose loyalty she needs. Watch how she talks about the people she's saved, always in terms of what they owe her for saving them. Arya grew up in a world of masks. She wore masks, literally. She knows the difference between someone who is kind and someone who is performing kindness. And everything about Daenerys set off the alarm that the Faceless Men spent years calibrating inside Arya's skull. She smiled too precisely. She measured her warmth. She spoke of love and liberation, but her eyes were always somewhere else, calculating, assessing, adding up the numbers of loyalty and leverage. Arya had met people like this before. In Bravos, in Harrenhal, in the dark corners of a world that chews up the naive and spits them out as bones. She knew exactly what Daenerys was. A true believer. And true believers, people who are so convinced of their own righteousness that the ends will always justify the means, are the most dangerous people alive. Because they don't think they're villains. They think they're chosen. And then came the scene that, when you watch it back, knowing everything we've just discussed, becomes one of the most quietly devastating moments in the entire series. Jon and Arya. Weirwood Tree. Winterfell. Jon defending Daenerys. That warm, stubborn loyalty that made Jon Snow both the most lovable and most dangerous kind of man. The kind who trusts people because he is trustworthy and can't imagine the world working differently. And Arya says it. Simple. Quiet. Without drama. I know a killer when I see one. Now, most viewers heard that line and thought, sure, Arya's suspicious, she's protective, she's a bit dramatic maybe. But that line is not a feeling. It's not jealousy. It's not Stark family protectiveness. That line is a diagnosis. From a most qualified person in Westeros to make it. Arya Stark was trained by the Faceless Men, an organization that has been killing people professionally, selectively, with precision for thousands of years. Their entire philosophy is built on understanding human nature at its most fundamental level. And their best student just looked at the Dragon Queen and said, she will kill. Not might, not could, will. And she was right. King's Landing burned. The bells rang. Daenerys heard surrender and chose devastation anyway. Thousands of innocent people, the exact people she claimed to be liberating, turned to ash. Everything Arya told Jon in that quiet moment under the Weirwood Tree came true. But Jon couldn't hear it then, because Jon was in love. And love, as we've established, makes you blind. Arya wasn't in love with Daenerys. She had no reason to see her as anything other than what she was. And so she saw clearly, perfectly, fatally clearly. Here's the full picture. Arya Stark rejected Gendry not to run from love, but to stay sharp enough to protect it. She stayed free because she knew that what was coming would require someone who wasn't tethered. Someone who could move through the shadows without a name, without a home, without a lord or a title or a dragon. Someone the enemy couldn't predict. And it was Arya, unattached, uncompromising, dangerously free, who drove the Valyrian steel blade into the Night King's heart. Not Jon, not Daenerys with her dragons. Arya, the girl who gave up love to stay dangerous. And after the long night, after the dust settled and the politics began their poisonous work, it was Arya who saw Daenerys for what she was and said so, out loud, to the one person who had the power to act on it. Jon. She planted that seed. I know a killer when I see one. And when Jon finally saw the ash and the fire and the bodies of the innocent, when he finally understood what Arya had told him beneath that Weirwood Tree, he acted. The Stark family survived. Sansa became queen in the north. Bran became king. Arya sailed west toward uncharted waters, free, as she was always meant to be. None of that happens if Arya becomes Lady of Storm's End. None of that happens if she lets love make her soft. None of that happens if she doesn't look at Daenerys on day one and see exactly what no one else was willing to see. The Stark survived because one of them refused to stop being dangerous. And she was dangerous enough to love something so much that she chose to protect it from a distance. There's a version of this story where Arya says yes, where she takes Gendry's hand, accepts the castle, becomes a lady, and tries, truly tries, to build a quiet life in a loud world. And maybe she's happy. For a while. But the Night King still comes. And Daenerys still burns. And Jon still needs someone to tell him the truth when everyone else is too dazzled, too loyal, or too afraid. And in that version, there is no one there to do it. No one left who's sharp enough, unguarded enough, brave enough to look the Dragon Queen in the eyes and see past the fire and the prophecy and the beautiful story she's telling about herself. Arya Stark looked at the most powerful woman in the world and said, "I know a killer when I see one." And she was right. And it cost her everything she might have wanted. And she paid that price without hesitation. That is not a girl running from love. That is a woman who understood exactly what love requires. Sometimes, it requires you to let it go. Not today. If you've never seen Arya's arc this way before, if this reframed everything for you, share this with someone who loves Game of Thrones. And subscribe, because we're just getting started pulling threads the show left behind.